Well, hello and welcome to Uncalled for tonight. We've got a great show planned for you. I'm Aimee Hogan, and we've got a whole bunch of us here tonight who are going to be talking some more about Iran and maybe squeeze in some election things to look out for, but mostly that's going to be next week. We're going to be talking about the results of the election next week. So that should be a lot of fun too. So we'll be going over that and seeing what happened. So, but tonight we're going to continue with the Iran updates because there seem to be a lot more now. So we'll get started and get right around the room. Let's see who's with us tonight. We've got DKG Custom. We've got M2M Matt with us tonight. We've got Commander 401. Good evening. And we've got Claire S. Bear and Dick Dawson as producer. So we have a great show and it's going to be a lot of fun. So let's just dive right in and see how everybody's doing tonight. How are you all today?
He's howling at the moon.
Hey.
Excellent. Excellent, Smithers.
Doing
well.
There we go. That's awesome. And poor Aaron, his election day is once again on his birthday. I'm sorry. I'm very sorry. But happy birthday. Happy birthday early. So
is it today? Is it election day today? Is it? Ooh.
No, Tuesday.
Tuesday. Oh, right, okay.
Mm-hmm. Tuesday the 8th.
No idea.
So, yeah, it's coming right up. So
is it like the UK? Is it usually a set day of the week? And like we always have a Thursday.
Yes, it's like that. We have ours. Yeah, it's usually it's either the first Tuesday, I think, after the first Monday, I think it is. It goes something like that, but it's definitely always a Tuesday in November. Yep. Usually within the first week or so. Mm-hmm. So that's how we do our elections and everything. And that's coming right up. So we've got some interesting things. It's going to be the midterm. So next week we're going to be covering that to see how things are going with that. And maybe some even more updates on everything else that we have going on as well. So that should be good too. So what is tonight? We've got, of course, Iran. So what is our first story tonight, Dick?
We got up first is Iran lawmakers and their demands for some severe punishments.
Okay. Sounds good. So
yeah, this is crazy. I mean, they're my God. In one article, you can alienate yourself from about 4/5 of the world in one shot here. It's unbelievable.
Exactly.
I mean, they're pretty well known for executions of gay people and various things like that, aren't they? So, it's pretty clear what they're talking about. So they're talking about making an example, and probably what they might do is they make an example maybe of, I don't know, a few of them or some of the ringleaders. And then that'll probably be it. And they'll probably hope then it all dies down. But I think that's going to flame it. I don't know what everybody else thinks.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a part here, Amy. We asked the judiciary to deal decisively with the perpetrators of these crimes and all those who assisted in the crimes and provoked rioters. 220 lawmakers from Iran's 290-seat hardline-led parliament said in a statement. Where is it here? There's it's in a second article we have.
Yes.
Yeah. They're urging for death sentences.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah, they're now urging. Yeah, so they get really.
Oh, there it is. Yeah.
The ultimate crackdown now. They're really starting to. They want to definitely.
Yeah, they're in Parliament reading it out. They're actually requesting it formally.
A majority, and the scary part is it's 227 out of the 290. It said in the other article, which is incredible to me. So they really want to. Really.
So it's not just a threat. Then they're actually talking about actually implementing it for certain.
Yes.
Are they actually going through the process of voting on it or whatever system they use there? I guess news agencies. All right. Yeah.
318 protesters, including 49 minors, 38 members of the security forces had also been killed. It added. So that is a lot. So that's what have been confirmed so far.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that is the size of almost 2 classrooms
Yes.
of children. That thought just makes me sick.
Mm-hmm.
That they, but how brave are these kids to be out there knowing that this could happen, but they're still brave and out there, fighting for their rights and everything. And it's just, it's absolutely incredible to me. It's just, I'm still floored by that.
Yeah. Yeah, thankfully they've got the countries with all the human rights organizations, like in Norway and all. They spoke out immediately. I see this statement from them, but the way that they're turning this, they're actually using their religious enemies. Like they're saying the enemies have been defeated in Iraq, Syria, Palestine, Lebanon, and Yemen. They're religious enemies, of course. Therefore, they've organized these riots as a reaction to victories of the Islamic Republic. In other words, they're trying to turn the protests into something else, not about freedom, but religion against religion, just the small factions against factions in that religion itself.
Exactly. And their
always,
interpretation of it.
Yeah, it always fascinates me how they try to do this movement on something, turn it into something else. Like, can't see what it is,
to justify, it's to justify their draconian measures that they're using for these crackdowns. That's exactly what it is.
Do you think they might be doing it this way as opposed to like Chinese did with Tiananmen Square? They just sent soldiers in to start shooting people. They're doing it this way to kind of, because if you think about it, okay, if they start shooting people on the streets, it could maybe get a Western response of some description. But with this, they're putting it into law. So really, there's not a whole lot the West can do about it because they can't really interfere with the laws of foreign countries. Can we?
Correct. So, sovereign nation. They can't really
kind of legitimizing it in a way. Yeah.
Exactly, because they're quote unquote elected officials, quote unquote voted on these measures, and so as far as other nations are concerned, their hands are tied because it's considered democratic. This is what they elected, this is what they voted in, this is what they want. So
they start executing people. There's not really a whole lot the West can do about it.
Right. Same as in Saudi Arabia, when you see all those beheadings and all those executions too.
Yeah.
They're a sovereign nation, and those are their laws. There's nothing you can do, even though it's gross.
You can complain. You can say it's wrong.
You can.
Sure.
You can complain
diplomatically,
but it's about as effective as
I mean, the Western human rights groups have been complaining about the about executions in China for a very long time, but it's never ended. It's never stopped.
No, and look how long. And look how long ago Tiananmen Square was. I mean, that's been quite some time now.
Yes.
And they're starting to really starting to make it more like a dictatorship now with Xi Jinping. So it's he's solidifying his power. So there could be more crackdowns in there too. The things might be getting harder on the citizens there as well. So, but what can you do? They're a sovereign nation. This is their form of government.
Yeah, I mean, you got the citizens of China starting to push back with the harsh COVID restrictions at the moment, are you? There's been protests and people running away from segregated areas and stuff like that, all kinds of different things. So, yeah, who knows what's going to happen with them? I can imagine something's going to happen with that, I'm sure.
Exactly. So, it's...
Well, perhaps some of the press that it's getting with the stuff that's getting leaked out is helping because, there are some politicians in Iran that are forcing to try to get peaceful protests. Not that it's as loud a movement, but it does seem to be like they are speaking up.
And
they just don't have the power. They're not in control. So,
well, that's exactly it. Because if unfortunately, this majority has just are now advocating for the death penalty for these protesters. It's, what can you do?
That's so fucked up.
Yeah, just think about it for just think about it for a minute. All these pious Muslims, right? They evidently can't keep themselves under control if a woman shows a little bit of hair, which shows you their piety, right?
True. But one good thing is that one of the people they're quoting is the senior advisor to the Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, and he's Khomeini, right? And he says that the government in Tehran badly needs to listen to the other side. I have never heard that said over there yet. Like, that's the first time I've seen that in quotes.
That's incredible.
And it says Larijani advised the government to consider the fact that perhaps the other side is also partly right. That's an outstanding quote if it's true, and it's coming from Dick. It's coming from your Iran article that you post. So I'm thinking, they wanted this out there.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Or just incidentally was reported on as well, because he did say it. But yeah, that's amazing. That's actually really good. If they start listening, hopefully.
But of course, like, they're going to also say, well, he's only doing that to protect himself against whatever happens because he's a politician, right? But, and they do in the article kind of infer that just a little farther down. They're like, yeah, well, he could just be.
It's part of the analysis.
Yeah, it's part of the analysis. He could just be saying that, but actually, I was encouraged to see that, because I've never seen that in quotes in writing anywhere, that anyone over there was speaking that the other side might actually have a point, because it's all been so violent, all the reporting that we get, that they just don't want to listen at all.
Exactly. Yeah, so that's incredible, though. That at least that's a step in the right direction. Hopefully. Exactly. So
did you want me to go to the Guardian article with the fresh protest eruption?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Yes, please. That would be great, and I'll pull that up myself too. Because that's a good one. That's a very good one.
I got it locked on the picture so everybody can see.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay. Fresh protests erupt in Iran's universities and Kurdish region. Movement against country's regime sparked by Mahsa Amini's death keeps going in face of crackdown. And the picture is of students of the Sharif University of Technology. They were protesting in early October in that picture. That's pretty good. That's really good. Let me bring my microphone close. There we go.
that looks pretty peaceful to me, doesn't it?
It does. That shot does. It looks very nice there too. A new protest erupted in Iran on Sunday at universities and in the largely Kurdish northwest, keeping a 7-week anti-regime movement going even in the face of a fierce crackdown. The protests, triggered in mid-September by the death of Mahsa Amini after she was arrested for allegedly breaching strict dress rules for women, have evolved into the biggest challenge for the clerical leadership since the 1979 revolution. Unlike demonstrations in November of 2019, they have been nationwide, spread across social classes, universities, the streets, and even schools, showing no sign of letting up, even as the death toll ticks towards 200, according to one rights group. Another rights group, Norway-based Henga, said security forces opened fire on Sunday at a protest in Marivan, a town in Kurdistan province, wounding 35 people. It was not immediately possible to verify the toll. The latest protest was sparked by the death in Tehran of a Kurdish student from Marivan, Nazreen Gadri, who, according to Henga, died on Saturday after being beaten over the head by police. Iranian authorities have not yet commented on the cause of her death. Henga said she was buried at dawn without a funeral ceremony on the insistence of the authorities, who feared the event could become a protest flashpoint. Authorities subsequently sent reinforcements to the area, it added. Kurdish-populated regions have been the crucible of protests since the death of Aimee herself occurred from the town of Saqqez in Kurdistan province. Universities have also emerged as major protest hotbeds. Iran Human Rights IHR, a Norway-based organization, said students at Sharif University in Tehran were staging sit-ins on Sunday in support of arrested colleagues. Students at the university in Babol in northern Iran, meanwhile, removed gender segregation barriers that by law were erected in their cafeteria, it added. So they have to even be segregated in their universities
Wow.
by gender. The protests have been sustained by myriad different tactics, with observers noting a relatively new trend of young people tipping off clerics' turbans in the streets. IHR said on Saturday that at least 186 people had been killed in the crackdown on the mahsaamini protests, up by 10 from Wednesday. It said another 118 people had lost their lives in distinct protests since 30 September in Sistan-Baluchistan, a mainly Sunni Muslim province in the southeast, presenting a further major headache for the regime. IHR said security forces killed at least 16 people with live bullets when protests erupted after prayers on Friday in the town of Khash in Sistan-Baluchistan. Amnesty International, meanwhile, said up to 10 people were feared dead in Friday's violence in Khash, accusing security forces of firing at demonstrators from rooftops.
Jesus.
So they're sniping them.
Fuck.
Yeah. Yeah, this has gotten really bad. I mean, but these people are so angry that they're not stopping. And to me, that's, I can't get over it. I'm impressed.
How brave. I mean,
Exactly.
snipers now, like you can't walk the street, you can't congregate in any type of group without it looking like a protest now.
Exactly.
Whoa. Oh, wow.
I know. And there are kids in amongst this that just floors me. And someone had made a comment earlier in the chat about how kids shouldn't have to be this brave, but they're pretty resilient and they're really impressive. And so, yeah, that's just amazing to me too. And it said, yeah, I know.
I'm sorry, go on.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, in one way, it needs to be the youth, because they are not yet jaded yet with going against things and against things and against things and not being able to make a change. They truly believe they may. And in that belief, you've got the strength and you possibly can. They're not jaded yet.
No, exactly.
So, I give them great, credit for going forward. We really need them to.
Absolutely, we do. I mean, they've got hope on their side too. And you can't crush that. So, I think they're really they might make an impact this time. It seems like they are, because they're already starting to,
It's their future at stake,
Exactly.
Not the elders that have lived it already, It's their future and their children's future that they're fighting for. So,
exactly. That's exactly it. So the rest of the article goes, Iranians continue taking to the streets and are more determined than ever to bring fundamental changes, said IHR Director Mahmoud Amiri Moghadam. The response from the Islamic Republic is more violence. The protest crackdown has also, for now, consigned efforts to revive the 2015 deal over Iran's nuclear program to the back burner and intensified focus on Tehran's ties with Russia, notably its supply to Moscow of drones used in the Ukraine war. The protests were fanned by fury over the restrictive dress rules for women, over which Aimee had been arrested, but they have now become a broad movement against the theocracy that has ruled Iran since the fall of the Shah. Meanwhile, Sunnis in Sistan-Baluchistan, where the alleged rape of a girl in police custody was the spark for protests, have long felt discriminated against by the nation's Shia leadership. IHR also warned that dozens of armed protesters had been charged with purported crimes, which could see them sentenced to death, up from only a handful earlier reported to be potentially facing that fate. As well as thousands of ordinary citizens, the crackdown has seen the arrests of prominent activists, journalists, artists, such as the influential rapper Tumaj Salehi. There is also growing concern about the well-being of Wall Street Journal contributor and freedom of expression campaigner Hossein Rognahi, who was arrested in September and whose family says is on hunger strike in Evin prison. In a new blow, his father, Ahmad, is now in intensive care after suffering a heart attack while conducting a vigil outside Ibn Hossein Ronahi's brother Hassan wrote on Twitter. I know. So journalists, contributors to places like the Wall Street Journal are even getting arrested. They don't like journalists at all. They don't want this news getting out.
Right. He was the journalist that reported on her death, right? And they're accusing him of spying for the CIA because he has ties to America. Yeah.
Exactly. The Wall Street Journal is his tie, so that's what they're going with. Just anything they can to try to discredit everybody, and that's really bad. Really bad.
I can't. It's hard to believe that people that when you were younger, that were literally your brothers and sisters in town and whatnot, can now be your enemy because you want to hold on to some outdated political nonsense that just needs to be kicked to the fucking curb. What a joke. Dear Lord.
It's insanity. It's absolute insanity. It's bad.
Yeah. So the next one we had up was another one on the lawmakers. We did kind of cover that, right? Should we go to the next one, which was politicians in Iran are seeing the protest turning into a deadly uprising?
Yes, please. That would be good.
That's good.
Yeah. So if anybody wants to take over and read for that'd be great if they want.
Yeah.
That'd be okay.
Yeah, I will if you want, unless someone wants
please.
to. Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
All right. So politicians in Iran see protests turning into a deadly uprising. Some of Iran's relatively moderate political figures seem to be advising the government to find ways to end political deadlock and the dangerous popular uprising. Nationwide protests have continued for 7 weeks and have escalated in recent days as security forces have killed more people, and the opposition in the streets has become more determined to overthrow the Islamic Republic's clerical military regime. Former, I think this is Majlis Speaker, now a senior advisor to Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, has said that the government in Tehran badly needs to listen to the other side. Laryani advised the government to consider the fact that perhaps the other side is also partly right. Nonetheless, I know, right? Like I'm smiling. Nonetheless, while the statement signals a sign of rationality, Laryani's next comments show that, like Khomeini, he also believes that enemies are behind the uprising. The enemy has targeted Iran as a whole, he said. Laryani charged, in a neighboring country, the Americans are openly telling Iran's counter-revolutionaries to be active and exert pressure on Tehran. However, he did not name that country. It is also possible that Laryani is repeating Khomeini's conspiracy theories as a shield for himself, not to be labeled disloyal by the Supreme Leader's hardliner supporters. And it's an updated photo of Laryani and the Supreme Leader, Al-Khamenei.
So can you just go back to that last sentence a minute? Sorry, that last paragraph that didn't make any sense. A lot of this says revolutions to be active and exert pressure. Oh, hang on a minute. What does it say?
It says the Americans.
The Americans
they didn't name the country.
They didn't name the country, exactly.
Yes.
Are you scared?
Yeah, because we conquered the world. Of course, we have many countries. There's obvious, right?
Yeah, America's influencing things, but not to name the Americans or anything. I'm not naming them.
We're not pointing any fingers, just a big old slap back.
They're calling her Kanye West.
Yes,
while showing the map of America. I'm not indicating any country.
How to say it's the United States without saying the United States.
But in this case, he did say it was the United States. What the hell?
Yeah, well, unless he thinks Americans live everywhere. We're everywhere. We're everywhere.
Yeah, Dick, it's your fault. Dick, it's all your fault. It's like saying, Dick, it's all your fault, but I'm not saying it's Dick's fault.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
But Dick is the fault, Exactly. It's insanity. I mean, that's it, yeah. That's that's just silliness on their part. It's
I know. I knew they were going to twist it. Like, I knew it was too good to be true, but I'm still happy they said it because it made a great clip.
Yeah,
it did. It did. And hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully somebody runs with it and just clips that. But anyway, shall I go on? I could stop.
Yeah.
Okay. Referring implicitly to some rude slogans chanted by Iranian protesters against Khomeini, Lariani said, "Some of the things we have done in the area of politics has left an impact on our social behavior." Wait a minute. Can I read that? Some of the things we have done in the area of politics has left an impact on our social behavior.
Like no every one of them?
Sherlock. Yeah, like no shit, Sherlock. Yeah.
Okay. He was probably referring to bad-mouthing, vile accusations, arrogance, and unilateralism that have become part of the usual practice among Iran's conservatives. Oh, no mention of the violence, though, huh? All right. Or the lack of them interfering in the violence is what I mean. I know the politicians aren't out there with the guns, but they're not actually stopping any of this. So, in another development, former Vice President mahsaamini Ebtekar. Oh my gosh.
Can I take that one?
Yes.
Former President, mess in my mouth, everybody please.
Okay, now I know I could do better than that. Okay.
Is that the same one you read out yesterday, Dick? I'm sure it was, wasn't it?
Is it mahsaamini Ebtekar? Is that it, Aimee? Is that
Ebtekar? Yeah, mahsaamini Ebtekar.
Ebtekar, also known as Nilufar, oh, that sounds better, Nilufar, one of the students that occupied the U.S. Embassy in Tehran in 1979 and held 54 U.S. diplomats hostage for 444 days, and is known to the former U.S. hostages in Iran as Sister Mary, offered her ways out of the current deadlock in a tweet on November 3rd. The best way to end this cycle of violence is to stop arresting protesters, listening to their demands, acknowledging that there are problems in the society, restoring justice, respecting Iranian men and women's freedom, making the government accountable, holding effective dialogues with the people, furthering all-encompassing reforms, restoring the people's trust in the government, and seeking their political participation in determining their own fate. Oh, that was about, well, she got a plan. That is a pretty tall order that Iran's reformists have pursued for a quarter of a century, only to see more repression.
Yep.
And bad governance. Yeah.
Exactly.
Ebtekar, who seems to have been moved by the violence Iranians witnessed during the protests on November 2nd, particularly in Karaj near Tehran, where at least 2 security officers were reportedly killed and many others wounded, advised the government to take measures sooner rather than later, because it will be too late. Seize the opportunity while it lasts, she wrote.
I mean, if you're going to look at a way that a civil war starts, right? If you look back in history, I mean, this ticks all the boxes, doesn't it? You know, I could just kind of feel this is how civil wars start. You know, you look at all kinds of other countries that have gone, a similar sort of way. It sort of starts off with this low-key sort of violence and sort of escalates and escalates and escalates, and the next thing you know, because I mean, like, the Iranian government are still going to get plenty of support, so they're not just going to roll over unless there's, unless the vast majority of the civilian population are going to rise against them. But I doubt it. In my opinion, I don't know what you think.
Well, the one thing they have is that the other side, when they're speaking out, when people are actually speaking with the protesters out that have any power, are actually speaking reasonably and asking for calm discourse and conversation and a meeting of the mind. So there's that. There's not like another extremist on the other end, so that they're just never going to meet together. That could be helpful. Because it is kind of seeping in. You could see, even though they twisted it, they hear it. They hear what they're saying, because they're starting to say it in their own parliament, right? They're in their own government. starting.
Because I mean, it seems that you do still have the, exactly like how in Russia and all kinds of other places, that you've got the hardliners and you've got the sort of the ones that are sort of a little bit softer on this sort of thing. So you could see that split, even happening. I don't know. It's just ticking all the boxes of a civil war at the moment. I hope it doesn't, but
It is. And when it comes to that younger generation that is really in the protest right now, convincing the older generation that it's going to be steadfast with the government right now because of their religious beliefs, this calm forwardness that they're speaking of, and that might resonate with them more. And get more of them to turn to the side. I mean, that's what I'm thinking. If you're going to turn somebody who's actually believing in a government doing wrong things, but because of a religious belief, you've got to hang on that what is the right thing kind of angle. And I think this calm approach, I don't know, and I admit to being naive, and I'm no political savant, that's for sure. I wear my rose-colored glasses proudly because I want to see the world the way I want it to be, and I want to work towards that goal. And so I actually hope that it does have a greater impact. She was in the protest prior. She was part of it before, and she is actually speaking out strongly and saying, this is what you need to do. Like, you got to do it now, or you're going to just suffer the consequences of this. It's all going to fall on your heads. And if, Khomeini's right-hand supreme leader advocate there is actually toting that line, even though he's blaming it on us Americans, that we're over there causing all the trouble. He did have some common sense to say before, even though they twisted it a little bit,
Yeah.
But
I mean, are the protests? I mean, are the protests seeming to be violent, or is the Iranian government just really sort of putting across propaganda-wise that they are violent protests? I mean, how is it appearing in general?
We're going to be reading soon about some of the more current ones. Police cars were attacked. There's been retaliation against violence. Most of the violent ones, if I'm correct, Aimee, anytime, correct me, jump in. It seems that it's the violent ones are in retaliation to a violence that just occurred. Most of the protests are peaceful, and the violence occurs when they try to break them up. They are breaking them up with pellets and gunshot and fire and all of these kinds of stuff. Like the breaking up of the protests because they don't want them organizing starts out violent from the get-go. There's no peaceful, just move on. There's take another step and I'll shoot you in the back, which was stunning to read about the last couple of times. How many people have actually been shot in the back, which means they were moving out of the way.
Right, they were running as they got shot. They were running away, and they shot and
children. So you could see that the breaking up of the protests is quite uncontrolled on the other side because they're actually shooting kids, and I can't imagine that they would want that on their heads as far as that's what they're doing. So.
I think these things, these shootings as well that have been reported, I mean, are they kind of sporadic, or does that seem to be happening with all the protests around Iran, with all this? Or, I mean, is it, I mean, how far is it escalating at the moment? Or is this really just the start of it? What are we seeing at the moment?
Well, I'm seeing stuff every day, but the stuff that leaks out because it's so hard to get stuff out, maybe
it's hard to tell
the worst examples of what's going on.
Right.
Honestly, I've yet to see what we would call a boots on the ground and eye view of someone who's actually there on a day-to-day basis, like what's going on. I haven't seen that yet. Although we did hear last week, we got good insight, from people that are dealing with it one-on-one. We can imagine what it's like. We haven't, as far as reporting from the journalists and all, we're only getting the extreme versions of most things. I'd agree, Matt, that when it starts leaking out like that in a controlled environment, they're not letting everything out. So in a controlled environment, only the worst, only the most horrific is probably, we're getting only a partial view right now.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. DKG, you wanted to jump in there?
Well, I mean, I was just going to bring up the point that Matt was talking about, the potential of civil war here, because the government are tightening their grip. Oh, hang on a minute, I'm still going to start quoting Star Wars now. Yeah, I mean, they are the evil empire. Are they building a fucking Death Star somewhere? I don't know. But the thing is about a civil war is you already have two factions in place. And at the minute, it's the government versus civilians. If there was another actual faction that would form out of this that can fight, I mean, do they have like an opposing electoral opposition? I very much doubt it, but you know what I mean. Right. You have to have something like in America. The American Civil War was the North and the South.
I think
in the British Civil War, it was in the British Civil War. It was the Royalists against the parliamentarians. So there's always two factions to start with. In this case, I'm not even too sure there is a second faction yet.
Exactly.
I mean, is it? Haven't we been seeing that though? Haven't we been reading things from? I don't know who those people were. Are they not leaders of some description, or I mean, who are they?
That's kind of like what I'm kind of asking too. Is there a body there that can be the leader of? Because it would be a rebellion. It would be a revolt.
I mean, that was why I kind of brought it up, because I was getting that impression that there was a faction that were kind of, sort of saying, oh, look, they might have a legitimate right, they've got a right to protest, blah, 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 blah. But then you seem to have these hardliners that say, no, let's push this law through. There needs to be, severe punishments. That's why I raised that question.
Yeah, I mean, if it's civil rights activists who are the other faction, or humanitarian rights activists.
I would agree.
Faction, they are not going to start a civil war.
Yeah, because obviously they're going to need some more political sort of backup, particularly, and also military backup as well. Yeah, absolutely, totally agree with you. But like I said, I only sort of brought up that comment really because it seemed to me that there was a kind of a split seemed to be going on.
You misunderstand me. I'm not arguing with you.
No, I know you're not.
I'm just trying to clarify. Yeah, is there something there? Is there an opposition?
It's with so little information coming out, we are getting more and more as time goes on, but it's hard to tell who's leading what at the moment. It doesn't seem very clear, but I'm sure that right now it just seems like everybody's angry, so everybody's protesting. But it's hard to tell exact numbers. It's hard to tell who's organizing, who's leading. Right now, it's kind of chaotic. Right now.
Yeah, and the lesson from the French, when you depose people, have somebody else ready. Otherwise, short men in big hats end up in charge.
That's no way to talk about Gadol.
I know.
Look out for short French people. That's not good.
She is one. She knows.
I'm short and I'm French.
I always do. Don't worry about
it. To what you all are speaking of right now, the final part of this article is just statements from those that kind of reiterate both sides pretty well. We heard what they were saying before, and then it says, on the contrary, referring to the same violent events, ultra-conservative lawmaker Ahmed Nadiri wrote in November 3rd tweet, "What happened in Karaj was not a protest. It was a security crisis. The level of confrontation by the security forces should be proportional to the protest, riots, mutiny, and terror. There is no room for appeasement." Hassan Ashari Madarari, the editor of Kayan Daily, which operates under the supervision of Al-Khamenei, Friday also called for harsher crackdown on dissent. But reformist analyst Mohammad Raza Tajik has opined on Saturday that the uprising by the Iranian people marks the violent return of a suppressed right to protest, as if we are facing a revolt for restoring the activism right that was in chains for a long time. So they're saying they have no room to let them do this because they're just out of control. So that's why they're violent. And the other side is saying, no, like you just keep pushing everybody down and not giving them a voice, and it's going to keep happening. It speaks loudly to exactly what Matt just said about internal civil conflict. They're just not listening to each other at all.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Space Wolf had a really good comment about that. He said the Kurds have been in an active armed conflict with the Iranian government for decades, as well as with other governments that have been oppressing them. They want their country, aka Kurdistan, back. And that is very true. There was another comment as well from Julie. See if I can find it. Yes, Julie Noor. She said, I saw a heartbreaking scene where an Iranian teacher standing in front of his student, stepping in front of the shooting soldier to try to stop the soldiers from shooting at his student. The student was screaming. He was so brave, and I think he was killed. That's very sad. And that's, you're going to see, and you're going to see more scenes like that. You're going to see, I'm sure there are parents out there with their kids. I'm sure trying to protect their kids. I'm sure that there are a whole bunch of other things going on there that we're not hearing about. We're just scratching the surface of it right now, which is not good.
I mean, do Iranians, particularly their military, do they not care that they're actually shooting and killing children as well as women? I don't
Probably
understand.
not.
I mean, they must know that they're children. I mean, they could see that they're children, but they're still deliberately shooting them at close range by the sounds of things, going by that comment.
Yeah, but probably because if they don't do it, they're going to get shot.
Well, maybe.
Right.
Maybe.
Well, that's it right there. It's quite an oppressive regime, so I'm sure that that's the case.
Yeah. I mean, you don't know how fanatical they might be as well. Exactly. Like Saddam Hussein's Ba'ath Party Guard were. They would have done anything he told them to do. They would do it. Didn't need to threaten them. So who knows? I don't know. I don't really know.
Exactly.
But going back to what Space Wolf was saying, if you don't mind, about the Kurds. I mean, the Kurds have been fighting everybody. They've been fighting Iraq for a long time to get their own independence. They've also had to fight ISIS, as we know, and a long-standing oppression from Iran as well. So lots going on for the Kurds. Bless them.
Absolutely, the poor things. They've been through a lot, and it's for a long time, for a very long time. So
there is a sad thing about like the Ba'ath Party itself, because at one time it was Ba'ath Muslims are actually outside of Iraq, blah, 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 are actually, Ba'ath I think means reform, and there are a lot of Ba'ath Muslims who don't like what Saddam did, and they don't like the fanatics. I just had to make that distinction because Ba'ath is just a word.
Yeah, well, it was an official party, wasn't it, in Iraq, from as I understand.
Yeah, it was Reform Party, and then they separate the word from the Ba'ath Party.
Yeah, I've got you. I see where you're coming from.
Exactly. Oh, and Emperor, the Senate Palpatine said, "Don't forget about Turkey. They still kill the Kurds as well." So apparently, they have a population of the Kurds there, and they're.
Oh yeah, Turkey is fun, right? Because there's places where Muhammad put his handprints and said the Christians and the Jews could stay there forever. You got his fingerprints. You can compare it to the places in Saudi Arabia where he did it. They're like, oh, yes, we believe Muhammad, whatever. And then when it comes to something that they don't want to do, they don't believe Muhammad.
Exactly. PJ CNET said the military unfortunately usually follow orders. They fear what will happen to them if they don't. But then most of them could be thinking the same thing and wouldn't dare mention it. Horrendous. You actually have a point there, PJ CNET. That's a very good one. Thank you. That makes a lot of sense too. Yeah, he's been awesome in these chats. He's been amazing. He's been having really good insight on these.
We agreed with him again. Dun, dun, dun.
There's a vortex going to open up and swallow us soon if we keep agreeing.
Yeah, careful, PJ. We're going to turn you.
We soon make a globe hour of you. You're still going to be a glober, trust me.
Absolutely.
Well, I hate to break it to you, Matt. He already is a glober. He just doesn't know it yet.
He just doesn't know it yet. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Michael Castrian said, all those around Khamenei have either paid off well or brainwashed to such an extreme belief they can do no wrong. Age of anyone wouldn't matter. Kid or an adult that doesn't conform, they're screwed. You're right, Michael. Very right.
Aimee, should we pull out the old honesty meter and just do it on the entire Iranian regime?
Yes, please.
All right, here we go. Oh, what a fail.
Yeah. Massive fail. Yeah. Massive fail. That's right. Yeah. And yeah, religious faith a la carte. Yeah. Unfortunately, it's what they do is they misinterpret religion. So none of us here are bashing any religions. We're not bashing any religious groups. We're not bashing any ethnicity. We're just bashing their government because their government is terrible. So there we go.
So should we go to the next one? The Germany planning the sanctions.
Yes, please. That would be great. Yep. And that's another good one as well. Okay, so it's Germany and sanctions. Where is it? Yeah.
It's one of the Iran ones from Iran International.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll drop it in the green room there again.
Oh, perfect. No, I got it right here. Okay, so it says, whenever you're ready. Oops, let me see if I got this.
Up and good.
Thank you. Germany planning new EU sanctions package over Iran protests. Germany and 8 other EU member states plan to impose a new set of sanctions on individuals and organizations helping the Islamic Republic in its crackdown on dissent. According to a report by German magazine Der Spiegel on Saturday, a package containing 31 proposals was introduced in Brussels on November 2nd, targeting individuals and institutions in the security sector, as well as companies responsible for suppression of the current wave of protests ignited by the death in custody of 22-year-old mahsaamini. Measures including the freezing of assets and travel bans, the magazine said without disclosing its sources, adding that the new punitive measures have a good chance of being approved by EU foreign ministers at their upcoming meetings slated for November 14th. Ties between the Islamic Republic and the West are increasingly strained, with Germany being among the first that started evacuating the families of the personnel of its embassy in Tehran and the teachers of German-run schools. Germany's government on Thursday urged its citizens to leave the country or risk arbitrary arrest and long prison terms there. Late in October, German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock said that her country and the European Union were examining whether to classify Iran's Revolutionary Guard as a terrorist organization for its use of violence in the protests. In mid-October, the EU sanctioned 11 Iranian individuals and 4 organizations for their role in the death of Mahsa Amini and the crackdown on the ongoing protests. These are the first and so far only EU sanctions over the ongoing protests.
I wouldn't hesitate to guess that once that starts, there'll be more.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's in this modern world that we live in, economic pressures do wonders. I mean, it hasn't solved Russia's bullshit attitude, but it's definitely hurting them in a big way.
Definitely. It's definitely is. The sanctions are a double-edged sword. I understand them wanting to do something and not sit back, but they can often harm the most innocent people. That's also right. True. That is also true. And but sometimes it does spark the right response. Unfortunately, I don't know if that's going to work here.
I'm going to jump ahead one article. I'm going to skip one. So I'm putting it in the green room for everybody here. But I think this leads exactly to what we're talking about here. If you want, I'll take this one.
Yes, please.
So we've got fire breaks out on Iranian oil pipeline. IRGC office nearby attacked. Oil workers have threatened in recent weeks to destroy everything they built in solidarity with protests sweeping the country. So, you know, like this goes with what DK was saying and a few others there as well. You need a united, you can't just have people running around on the street going, fuck you. And this might be a sign that there is something of that building. So I'll stop babbling here, but A fire broke out in an oil pipeline in the port city of Bandar Mashar in the southwestern Iran on Sunday, sparking suspicions of foul play as protests continue to rage across Iran. And there's some, I guess that would be Mallory squiggly math in a way there. Whoa, what the fuck just happened? Okay. And video reportedly from the scene showed a large plume of smoke rising from an area near oil tanks. The fire caused damages, but no casualties were reported, according to IRNA. The governor of Bandar told IRNA that the fire was contained and that the cause of the incident is under investigation. While Iranian social media users theorized that the fire could have been caused by sabotage, there were no reports by opposition or regime media indicating that this was the case.
I mean, if it was done for a cause, the whole idea of doing something like that for a cause, you would actually come out publicly and say, yes, it was me.
You would take responsibility, like
So,
sometimes, like Islamic State has done in the past.
Also, do you think it was the People's Front of Iran or the Popular Front?
Splitters!
He's over there. But so additionally on Sunday, military headquarters belonging to the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps was targeted by an attack, in quotations, with the IRGC officers killing one of the attackers while a second attacker escaped. The IRGC did not provide further details. And the oil workers are threatening to launch protests and strike. In September, the Organizing Council for Protests of Oil Contract Workers warned that oil and petrochemical workers would strike if the suppression of protesters continued. Workers at multiple oil facilities launched strikes in recent weeks, with a number arrested and imprisoned, according to the Organizing Council. It keeps going on and on here, so I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. But the council has stressed that the failure to deliver these reports disrupts the oil ministry's ability to plan oil distribution for provinces, factories, and the food industry, and can cause serious issues. The management of the company has threatened the workers with legal action, but the workers intend to continue their protests, according to the Organizing Council. So I hope they do. Good on you. Well done, guys. Awesome.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. You know.
I hope more people in positions like that start standing up and you know, it's not just chaos in the streets, but it starts getting organized and they have to start taking it more seriously and not just, you know, be shooting people.
Like the shipyard workers in Poland that wound up kicking the Soviets out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All the strikes that they did. Yep. I remember that. That was incredible.
Indeed.
Oh.
Yep.
So let's here is another one that's not going to be nice. Here, Claire, I'll drop this for you or whoever wants to read next in the green room. I got it all loaded up and ready.
I don't mind unless someone else wants it.
Go.
No, okay.
Yes, please.
Oh, God.
Thank you.
Okay. From Iran International again, 4 dead as soldier opens fire on police personnel in Iran. An Iranian soldier has opened fire on personnel at a police station in Bampur in the Flashpoint province of Sistan and Balochistan, killing 4 on Sunday. Social media users say the incident is related to the heavy crackdown on protesters by government forces in the southeastern province. However, the city police chief alleges that a personal dispute between the attacker and another soldier led to the shooting, while other personnel present at the headquarters intervened. This incident led to the death of 3 police staff and 1 soldier, and the assailant is under arrest, added Bampur's police chief. Sistan and Balochistan has been the hotbed of an anti-regime demonstration since September, after protests against mahsaamini's death spread to over 100 cities across Iran. Security forces killed scores of Sunnis during protests on September 30th, and the influential cleric of the provincial capital, Zahadan Molavi Abdulhamid, held Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei responsible. The attack by the IRGC left more than 90 unarmed Balak citizens dead, as reported by human rights watchdogs in Iran and abroad. Security forces once again opened fire at protesters with live ammunition, while a huge crowd of people chanted "Death to Khomeini" and "Death to Dictator" during protests in Kash and Zahedan following Friday prayers November 4th. Molavi Abdul Ahmed, who called for the plebiscite in Iran during his Friday prayer sermon November 4th, confirmed the death of at least 16 people and dozens of more injuries in Kash. Whoa. Wow.
How can these people be stupid enough to think that they're going to just bludgeon their people into submission in this day and age? What the hell?
I know.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
It's, yeah.
Mm. I mean, I understand, like, but this is a soldier opening fire on the police. Like,
yeah.
I'm a little confused here because they work together against the protesters, right? So, this one confused me a bit. I mean, help me out here, somebody, because, like,
right.
Yeah, like, does that mean the Iranian soldier was so upset about what the police and they're doing against the protesters that he just?
That's what I think.
There's your authority split, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
That you could see that right there. Could be a prelude to one of the preludes to civil war. Like I said, for me, on my mind, it's starting to tick the boxes.
It is, especially since the word soldier has a bit of a weight to me. It's when you're a soldier, you are under direction and with commitment to what they're doing. And here he is actually attacking the supporters of it against what they're doing. And to me, that speaks loudly of quite a bit of dissent coming down the line. I think you make a valid point there. It's got all the boxes.
Remember last week, Alexander said they took the guns away from the army, and basically most of the guns, if not all of them, are under the control of the Revolutionary Guard. They must have had to arm some soldiers for reinforcement or whatever, and this is what happens.
With the way the government are handling this, is it mostly military that are going in and doing these shootings? Then is it, or is it police, or
it's
military?
The bulk of it is probably the Revolutionary Guard is the most well-armed, well-fed, and everyone else is kept in line by them. But if you let the actual army itself, that's not well-fed and is just as low on the totem pole as anyone else, have the same access to the guns, they might actually turn on the Revolutionary Guard because they're the zealots. They're the people who are paid and also brainwashed the most.
Right.
Exactly. There were a couple good comments in the chat that I just love. Emperor of the Senate Palpatine says, I just realized how odd it is that almost at the same time, the Roman Empire and the Han Dynasty went through huge civil wars and were both split into 3 kingdoms / empires and then united again. And then J.A. said it's a sign of their weakness that their regime really is threatened by the women. The U.S. didn't kill a lot of people in the Middle East because it was sure of their security there. There we go. But yeah, it's the part that really stood out to me. It's they're threatened by the women who want to. They're fighting to just not have to worry about what they're wearing as they go out.
Dear God.
I know, absolutely. Like, control ourselves, please.
Over fucking clothing. What the hell?
They're that oppressed that they have to, they can't even leave their house without making sure that they're dressed in the way that the other people think is appropriate, not what they think is appropriate.
I think I have a solution to this. All men in Iran should tape their dicks to the side of their legs so that women can dress how they want to. There. You obviously can't control yourself, so we'll take care of it. Screw you. Or why don't we just, surgically remove their nutsack, and once you've proven to society that you can act responsibly around women, we'll give them back to you. There we go.
Yeah, I mean, some years ago, I was involved in a political group, and we actually went to see some people in a mosque. One of the questions came up about the hijab and wearing the full face veil and all the rest of it, and what choices actually women had. And they explained to us and said, well, it's not. I mean, the origins of the hijab may be religious, but the choices of how they're actually worn, or how much you actually have to cover, or whether you can or can't choose to do so, is cultural. And it varies from culture to culture, from country to country. So I'm kind of glad you said that, Dick. You're criticizing, Iran about this rather than, Islam as a whole, because Islam as a whole,
because it's not right. And that's what we've been saying in the past before. Right. We do not bash religion. We,
it's bigger. It
interpretation.
Is all of Islam, right, Aimee? Exactly. But
well, I mean, the women that we spoke to, when we got a chance to speak to them, they said, because there were actually some women there that weren't wearing the hijab, and there was one that was wearing the full face veil, and the others just had the headscarves, and there was one that wasn't. And we got a choice, and you said because they all came. This is actually the Islamic Culture Centre in Belfast, I think they call it. And they have a mixture of people from all kinds of different countries speaking about 15 different languages, which is difficult. So, it really did sort of appear that it really proved actually, because there were differences of people, the women wearing different clothing, that it was definitely cultural rather than just a religious choice. And like I said, they all said as a piece, they chose to wear this clothing. Nobody forced them to do it.
Right. And one of the striking parts about these protests now, and that they're being triggered, is that before the political forces in Iran decided to use the power of this religious minority to their benefit, it was freer in Iran. We have pictures of women walking around in jeans and regular clothes with just a headdress on, and it was totally acceptable in the big cities. All the universities, all of these students were not used to having to clamp it down so much until they got back into power, which is where a lot of the resistance was coming so forcefully. They had a little taste of reasonableness, and then it was like taken back again. And currently with the Supreme Court here, I can understand what they're feeling, not to the point of that kind of protest, but with all the other freedoms that have been clamped on them, you could see how it got so violent, because they had a little bit of reasonableness at one time. They had a taste of it, and they took it back. Which,
prior to the revolution, they were quite secular. There were women. A lot of the young girls weren't even wearing hijabs or anything, or any head covering at all. I mean, they were dressing in Western clothes. That
was the same in Afghanistan, if you remember. Afghanistan in the 50s and 60s, it was the same before the fanatics took over. Exactly that. I mean, they're walking around in jeans and playing rock and roll and all the rest of it as well. And now it's one of the most oppressed parts of the world,
right now that the Taliban is taking over that again. Exactly. And now this regime right here is really clamping down hard on what people do. I mean, and like you said, when you were speaking to that Islamic group, how it was a choice for them. Sadly, in Iran, it's not a choice. They don't have a choice. They have to follow. They have to go out, and at least I'm not sure exactly how strict it is, but it's very strict, obviously, because people are getting hauled in all the time for not dressing quote unquote appropriately as far as they're concerned. So it's for them, it's forced, and that's that means lack of freedom, and it's all about control. Aaron had
same in Afghanistan before the US actually sort of came into and evaded really, essentially. That is, we saw the what were they called them religious police, didn't they? They were walking around making sure that men had beards and the women were behaving themselves and covered themselves up. And literally the police were whipping these women in the street if they weren't doing what they're told to do, or walk at a certain place where they're not allowed to walk, or all kinds of ridiculous stuff like that.
It's an Islamic version of the Handmaid's Tale.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
A lot, exactly. Aaron Reese had a great comment. It's all about control, and no population can be kept in servitude without their consent. This rebellion has been decades in the making, and Aaron is right on that one. Definitely. There have been some great comments in here about that. So keep them coming, everybody. Thank you so much. Yeah.
No.
Oh, yes. But it's all about control, and that's one of the biggest things that they have in these regimes that are oppressing their people, like China, like Iran. Even though China is not religious, but it's a form of control. They want to keep control of everybody. They have to make sure that they toe the line as much as possible, or they do face getting, rebellions and having it, things like that happen where people want their freedom. And you can't blame them. Everybody wants that, but that's exactly what it is, though. It's definitely control, and they want to keep their fists on everybody. And
I kind of like William Kirchmeyer's. Sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you. I kind of like William Kirchmeyer's comment. The more I'm aware of humanity's shortcomings, the more I value dogs and motorcycles. Yeah.
And my kitty cats.
Fair point.
And my kitty cat there that I post all the time. Yeah.
Oh, there were
great.
Aimee, there were two comments in there in regards to Islamic law currently. Well, I think it was Christina he mentioned, and I'll paraphrase here instead of quoting her because I can't see the quote anymore. But she was talking about how the men have the power for penalizing the women about shame in their family, and that even when a woman is attacked for not wearing her hijab or for doing anything, if a man acts aggressively towards her, or does anything violent, or even in the terms of some unwanted contact, it's blamed on the woman. Depending on the amount of shame that the family feels, it's written in their laws that they're allowed to penalize her with death.
Yeah.
If the brothers and the father feel that she has been shamed, even if it's not her fault, she's dead.
Yeah,
okay.
That's right. There's been multiple cases actually in Afghanistan where it's been reported where women have actually been raped by a married man. So he's actually committed adultery and committed rape, but he got something like 50 lashings, but she was executed.
Exactly, because she had committed adultery with a married man, even though she was raped.
Right,
even though she was raped. Exactly.
A double standard, which is to Aaron's point, which I love this comment, because this is true also. In that same law, if someone steals, they get their hand cut off. That's how regimented it is. But following that logic, what do you think the penalty for SA should be? I hear you, Aaron. I hear you.
I hear you.
Like they're getting away with it. It's all on the women,
Absolutely. Go ahead, Commander.
Not all Muslims are like that. A Christian told me about a kind of like an Islamic kibbutz that sold purses to in France in Senegal. The security guard caught someone stealing inventory, brought it before the guy who ran the place. And the guy who ran the place said to the security guard, "Can you forgive him?" And he's like, "No." And they kicked the security guard out of the community. I'm not saying all Muslims are like that, but some of them are moderate enough to have mercy.
Well, we would have to mean that here in the United States, we'd had to report on and actually try to prosecute many of these actual incidences happening here on our soil.
If they did that, they'd be in jail.
Here we've seen a lot of it and had to prosecute people for doing it. They felt they were right under their religious belief to kill their family member over this stuff, and they were prosecuted for it under our laws because it happened here.
Absolutely. And welcome, Nicholas. How are you? Good to see you.
Nick.
Nick.
Hello, Nick. Nick, you're muted. Muted, Nick.
Nick
I
doesn't
muted
want to
Nick.
say hi to us.
Yeah. When am I not muted? Thank you, guys. So that's how you know I'm on a stream, is you hear absolutely nothing for the first 15 seconds. Yeah.
Here, let me play a classic Nicholas Lamar Soutter intro.
You know what? I don't even know why I come on here. It's for all the beautiful people here except Dick.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Nick, for that.
I'm doing good, thank you. I'm glad to be here. So thank you, guys.
Nick, get away before it's too late. Just run away now.
Just run away. Yeah.
He's trapped. He can't get out, just like the last meets we had.
So should we do the comrades and sanctions? Because I'm sure Nick got in at just the right time.
Absolutely. This would be a good one.
This is
who wants to take us through?
Who's up to read? Aimee, do you want me to take it? I'll take it if you want.
Sure, that's what. It's probably my turn. I mean, you read it. I'll read.
No, go ahead.
Yeah. Go
we would love that, Matt. Go.
Put it up. I'll read it. Okay, I'll have to go a bit closer.
I can even zoom it a bit more.
Yeah, zoom in a little bit because I'm old and getting blind as a bat. Comrades and sanctions. Can Iran help Russia weather the economic storm? The potential for cooperation in certain areas like military technology may look promising, but Iran cannot be counted upon to really help the Russian economy withstand the impact of sanctions. Since the start of the war in Ukraine, relations between Russia and Iran have flourished, having hit by a new raft of tough Western sanctions over its invasion of Ukraine. Moscow set about looking for alternative partners among the other traditionally anti-Western countries, including to bypass trade restrictions, and Iran looks set to be one of the most promising. Yeah, that figures. The aspect of the relationship has attracted the most attention recently is Russia's use of Iranian drones to terrorize Ukrainian cities. Both the Russian and Iranian governments have denied that the kamikaze drones the Russian army is using in Ukraine are Iranian. But all the evidence suggests that they are. Ukraine's military intelligence services said at the end of October that Iran was also about to start supplying Russia with missiles. This is far from the extent of their joint projects, however. This year has seen a record number of meetings between senior Russian officials and their Iranian counterparts, including a video to Tehran by Russian President Vladimir Putin. There was much discussion at these meetings how to circumvent Western sanctions with Iran's help. They also are aimed at showing Russian domestic audiences that Russia is not isolated on the international stage despite Western efforts. What do you think so far? Any comments? No? You want me to carry on?
I think
we know the drones are Iranian because Iran is the only country that manufactures their drones out of balsa wood.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. It's as simple as that.
Didn't Zelensky prove it before the actual invasion that those drones were provided in preparation? Like they had them prior. They were shooting them down.
They were provided prior, yes, but they were proven only somewhat recently. But yeah, it's been absolutely proven. And if there was any doubt, I wouldn't have made the joke. No, we know, and that's a whole other story. But,
I mean, they have since kind of admitted it, haven't they? They've said that we've been supplying, but they said they actually supplied them months before the war. Yeah, could be, maybe, but there's a fact that isn't there another batch of drones coming over, some different ones or something, isn't there? From what I understand from another report.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they found some balsa wood, so they're going to whip up another batch.
And like I said it before. They're adding more rubber bands. You got to watch out. They put the rubber bands there, and those things can fly a little longer. You just wind them up, with your hands, and you're good to go.
Yeah.
I wonder if they're using Arduino kits to guide them.
Anyway, I'll read a bit more. The meetings did yield concrete agreements too. Gazprom, for example, has promised to invest $40 billion in Iran's oil and gas sector, while Iranian spare parts for both the motor vehicles and airplanes, as well as vehicles themselves, will be exported to Russia. There's also been a surge in the number of flights between the two countries. While the trade turnover, which stood at $4 billion in 2021, could reach $6 billion in the near future. I can't read what that says at the end. It's gone out of focus, according to Iran. Yeah, sorry, it just went out of focus for a little while. I don't know why it does that. This is not to say, however, that Iran will be able to compensate the Russian economy for the losses incurred as a result of Western sanctions. Even those forecasts for the small growth in trade turnover are accurate. That is still less than 1% of Russia's total foreign trade. There is a huge gap between Iran countries like Turkey, who trade with Russia, is worth about $30 billion a year. Holy crap, $30 billion.
Mm-hmm.
Even the new agreements that have raised more doubts than optimism. Iran's civil aviation industry has been in a crisis for many years, also due to Western sanctions, and certainly will not be savaged by the sale of individual parts in Russia. The Iranian automobile industry has also seen better days. This year, the government decided to stop manufacturing a range of models due to the excessive fuel consumption, poor safety and ecological standards, and high cost compared to similar models made elsewhere. It will make up for deficit by importing foreign cars. Implementing the large-scale Russian state projects in Iran and making them cost-effective won't be plain sailing either. Tehran has a deficit of hard currency and has been battling a budget deficit for years. This has created problems for Moscow in the past. Iran has still not paid off its debts to Russia for building the Bishir nuclear plant. As of 2021, it's still owed over $500 million. $500 million is a bit of a drop in the ocean, really. The new initiatives, such as the construction of the Syric power plant and the electrification of Iran's railway, are due to be financed with the help of Russia loan of $5 billion. If Moscow's mission to increase its political influence in Iran using these projects, then its approach can perhaps be justified, but it certainly won't help to save the Russian economy at a time of sanctions. Any project may be further complicated by various and growing waves of protests Iran has been seeing for the last 18 months. The outbursts of unrest are becoming increasingly massive, protracted, and uncompromising in their criticism of the country's political regime. Indeed. The authorities' harsh response, closing down public places and limiting internet access, is only making matters worse. The government loses control of the situation in the country overall, or even in individual regions, Iran could be plunged into severe Venezuelan-style crisis, leading to increased crime, taxation problems, and difficulties maintaining critical infrastructure. This level of instability is creating serious investment risks and getting in the way of implementing any agreements. Any comments so far?
Well, I personally, in the situation Russia's in right now, for them to be pledging all this support to Iran financially and whatnot, especially with Iran on the brink of internal crisis of its own, just like it's being described here, to me, this is all just a bunch of posturing that might not ever come to pass.
No, exactly. They might not. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, Russia's having its own trouble right now, right?
So now I'm in the unenviable position of having to say I agree with Dick.
Wow.
I was wondering.
Wow.
But it is a good point. It is a good point. Yeah.
Because how can they follow through on any of this? I mean, it's only a little bit less than what Elon paid for Twitter. And I know that makes that really weird in and of itself. But I mean, I just don't see it. I mean, they can't even arm their troops with better than cardboard shields, for God's sakes, right?
Did I hear that correctly? It only makes up 1% of the losses from the sanctions. Was that what that 1% number was?
I think it was. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is basically they're probably each doing something different with this. I can't believe Putin thinks this is going to help. It may be a Hail Mary pass. I don't know, but I mean they'll get some stuff, and we probably that 1%. If he can get electronic components to put into tanks and to put into missiles, because he's almost out of his. The reason he has to use the Iranian drones, there's a reason they didn't start with them. It's because they actually had real missiles that could function very similarly to U.S. missiles. They're all spent, and they can't make more. They can't buy more. And they again, we talked about this before. The reason they're making tanks from 1962 is because that was the last year that the tanks didn't have computer parts in them, and they can't put computer parts. So now Iran can help with some of that because Iran can get some of those. Iran has sanctions, but not nearly as bad. So they can help with some of that. But how much? I mean, if you're just looking to help with the war, that 1% may be enough to help, especially if it's an electronic components. But short of that, it's going to do nothing for the economy. So this is a very short-term thing for Putin, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
And what happens when Russia doesn't make good on their promises to Tehran?
No, but nobody expects them to. The Russians have an expression. This is an expression for the workers, but it applies to everything in Russia. We pretend to work, and they pretend to pay us.
Yeah, that's right. And the military at the moment is no exception to that rule at the moment.
And nobody expects they're going to make good. What they expect is that they can hold back just enough, that they pay just enough, and they, so they're going to wait until, they're like, oh, our shipments of these new drones are having a hard time. Your live chat had it right. They've upgraded the drones apparently to Pine, but these new shipments would love to get them to you, but we're having a little trouble with our rail, which you said you'd pay for, and you'd give us you'd help us implement the electrical systems. And Russia says, oh, crap, and they do just that much. And in the end, everybody still owes everybody a lot, but they've gotten just enough out of it to make it worth it is probably what they're shooting for.
Yeah. Oh.
Anyway, shall I carry on reading?
Yeah, sure thing, dude.
Yep. Yes. Another major obstacle to cooperation is that Russia is still widely seen for historical reasons as a colonial power seeking to gain control over local resources. That's true. Polling shows that public opinion of Russia nosedived in Iran following the invasion of Ukraine. In February and March, there were even small-scale protests in Tehran against Moscow's actions. What was there now? Mm-hmm. It will not be easy, therefore, the Iranian authorities to present the I can't read it. It's what it says. It keeps going out of focus. Authorities to present the rapprochement with Russia is an achievement to the public. Major deals with Moscow could themselves spark further protests. Just last year, there were mass demonstrations in Tehran following the signing of a long-term strategic cooperation agreement with China. Iran could teach Russia plenty about living under sanctions. This is really the area the most potential for experience sharing. Iran's example shows. Iran's example shows, however, while the negative impact of sanctions can be mitigated, it cannot be negated entirely. Of course it can't. Iran's GDP is absolute terms is today roughly that was back in 2010, 2011, when the main sanctions package against Tehran was introduced, while per capita, it's the level it was back in 2004, 2005. Christ. The Iranian experience is hardly an inspiring one. It certainly is not. With the rapprochement between Moscow and Tehran showing no sign of ending at any time soon, the potential for cooperation in certain areas, like military technology, may look promising. But Iran cannot be counted upon to help the Russian economy withstand the impact of sanctions in any significant way.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, even having to say that, the guy was probably like, I shouldn't even have to write this, but I better. Because come on, of course they can't.
Absolutely.
And remember, Alexander said that the Iranians think that they have made Putin their bitch. My goodness, one day there's going to be a statue of Strahd somewhere in Tehran celebrating our friend Alexander.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
I have one that we could go right into here. I'll drop it in the green room for anybody who wants to read. And it's probably the one to go into right after that.
Okay.
Let's
Is it the nuclear program?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll go ahead and I'll take that one. Okay, so this is an exclusive. Iran is seeking Russia's help to bolster its nuclear program, U.S. intel officials believe. By Natasha Bertrand from CNN. It says Iran is seeking Russia's help to bolster its nuclear program, U.S. intelligence officials believe, as Tehran looks for a backup plan should a lasting nuclear deal with world powers fail to materialize. The intelligence suggests that Iran has been asking Russia for help acquiring additional nuclear materials and with nuclear fuel fabrication, sources briefed on the matter said. The fuel could help Iran power its nuclear reactors and could potentially further shorten Iran's so-called breakout time to create a nuclear weapon. Experts emphasize to CNN, however, that the nuclear proliferation risk varies depending on which reactor the fuel is used for. And it is also not clear whether Russia has agreed to help. The Kremlin has long been outwardly opposed to Iran obtaining a nuclear weapon. But the Iranian proposal has come amid an expanding partnership between Iran and Russia that in recent months has included Iran sending drones and other equipment to Russia for use in its war in Ukraine, and Moscow potentially advising Tehran on how to suppress a protest movement sweeping Iran, U.S. officials said. Iran has said its nuclear program is only for peaceful purposes and that it formally halted its weapons program. But U.S. officials have stated that Iran's uranium enrichment activities have gone far beyond the parameters of the 2015 nuclear deal, and that the amount of time it would take for Iran to produce enough fissile material for a nuclear weapon has shortened to just months. In June, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken warned lawmakers that Iran's nuclear program is galloping forward. The longer this goes on, the more the breakout time gets down. It's now down by public reports to a few months at best, and if this continues, it will get down to a matter of weeks. The Biden administration is watching any new areas of cooperation between Iran and Russia with concern. Any covert Russian assistance to Iran that could boost Iranian efforts to produce a nuclear weapon would also mark a significant shift in Russian policy, given Russia's membership of the P5+1 group of countries that have been part of the negotiations to stymie Iran's nuclear program. As we have said, the JCPOA is not on the agenda, the National Security Council spokesperson Adrienne Watson told CNN, referring to the formal name for the Iran nuclear deal, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. We have been working with partners to expose the growing ties between Iran and Russia and hold them accountable. We will be firm in countering any cooperation that would be counter to our non-proliferation goals. The Iranian mission to the UN and the Russian Foreign Ministry did not return requests for comment. Ukraine alleged Iran is seeking help from Russia. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky suggested last week that Iran is looking to Russia for help in its nuclear program in exchange for the military assistance it has given to Moscow, but the intelligence obtained by the U.S. does not indicate the existence of an explicit quid pro quo, sources said. Instead, Iran's overtures to Russia appear to at least partially motivated by a strong belief among senior Iranian officials that a new nuclear deal either won't be revived or, if it is, won't last. Sources briefed on the intelligence told CNN that Iran's concerns appeared most acute over the summer, as it appeared to be closing in on a new nuclear deal with the U.S. and other world powers known as a P5+1, a group that includes Russia. Iran's fear was that a future administration might pull out of a deal, as the Trump administration did in 2018, so it sought a side deal with Russia that would allow it to reconstitute its nuclear program quickly if necessary. CNN has previously reported that Iran sought guarantees from the U.S. that a future administration would not renege on the deal, a promise the U.S. said it could not make. Asked whether the growing Iran-Russia partnership was a factor in the nuclear deal talks getting derailed, a senior administration official told CNN, obviously side deals between Russia and that fundamentally undermine the structure of the 2015 agreement would be a serious concern and further reduce the possibility of a return to the agreement. The official declined to comment specifically on intelligence assessments. James Acton, co-director of the Nuclear Policy Program at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, said he does not believe Iran necessarily needs the help, but that they do have an incentive, namely to produce the fuel more quickly, cheaply, and on a shorter timeline. They do have clear incentives to ask for help, particularly on the fuel side, Acton said. 3 to 4 years ago, when U.S.-Russia relations were bad but not catastrophic, I would be pretty skeptical that Russia would provide Iran with help, Acton added. But under today's conditions, under which U.S.-Russia relations are extremely bad and Russian-Iranian relations are getting better, I think the equation looks quite different for Russia. The U.S. withdrawal from the JCPOA also likely increased Russia's willingness to help Iran in this respect, Acton noted, and especially now that a new deal appears out of reach. Russia played a key role throughout 2021 in the nuclear deal talks and even mediated some deals that allowed the International Atomic Energy Agency to move forward with inspections at Iranian nuclear sites, effectively keeping the negotiations on track. After Russia's invasion of Ukraine in February, however, Russian officials appeared less invested in the deal. In June, Russia rejected a resolution proposed by the IAEA that criticized Iran for failing to cooperate with inspections of uranium traces found at some undeclared nuclear sites in the country, a critical sticking point that contributed to talks being derailed. That same month, the Russian delegation began making visits to an airfield in Iran to examine weapons-capable drones, which Russia has now purchased and used in Ukraine by the hundreds. U.S. officials have emphasized in recent days and weeks that nuclear deal negotiations are all but dead, at least for now. The Iranian regime's brutal and violent crackdown on protesters and support for Russian military operations in Ukraine has made it increasingly difficult for senior Biden administration officials to envision striking a deal with Tehran that would provide it with a financial windfall in the form of sanctions relief. The U.S. Special Envoy for Iran, Rob Malley, said on Monday that while the United States remains committed to diplomacy to constrain Iran's nuclear program, U.S. officials are not going to waste our time on the nuclear deal if nothing's going to happen. Instead, the U.S. is now focused on areas that can be useful, Malley said, while like supporting protesters in Iran and looking for ways to stop Iranian weapons transfers to Russia. He noted that the U.S. still has a preference for diplomacy in dealing with Iran, but, he added, we will use other tools and in last resort, a military option if necessary to stop Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's just me, but that's a country and a regime that I do not want to see in possession of nuclear armaments. No way.
Nope. Definitely not.
No, same here, but I mean, even worse is North Korea, and they have. Well, to a lesser extent, but they still have.
I'm not as concerned actually by North Korea having them. North Korea, as crazy as Kim Jong-un is, he's not a religious zealot who thinks that his God wants him to exterminate a percentage of the population on this planet. In Tehran, they do feel that way. So they're not going to hit us with them. They're not going to hit the U.S. They're not going to hit the UK with nuclear weapons if they get them, but they will deploy them, and they will deploy them in the Middle East.
Right.
Yeah, I don't suspect that North Korea would attack the West in any shape or form, but it depends on where they would likely deploy them. You know.
Yeah, I'm not saying I'm comforted by Kim Jong-un having them, but I think the worst case scenario for like global stability, the worst case scenario is a country such as Iran getting nuclear weapons. I think that's a real problem because you can't negotiate with them to not use them.
Exactly.
And you got to remember too, China would not be thrilled with North Korea basically fucking up all of their business by launching nukes. China would probably just let the United States and South Korea bulldoze little Kimmy.
Yeah, there's a way to keep every country, even Russia, who's had nuclear weapons for a very long time, we've been able to keep them in check for using them. The only country that I can think of, no way, there's nothing we have that we can barter with, because it comes down to religious principles, is Iran. That's I don't know what we do if they get them.
Exactly.
So a lot of that article, I mean, it's interesting stuff. I don't buy most of it. Well, the U.S. isn't going to negotiate with Iran because of how they're treating protesters. We've worked with the first. I don't think it was the first, but it may have been one of the first weapons deals ever made with Saudi Arabia was made by then Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld under George Bush Sr. And we knew what they were going to use those weapons for, was to brutally oppress their own people. The U.S. works with dictators. We do it reasonably frequently, and that's what we did with Saudi Arabia. The economic boom of the 90s, for which Clinton gets all this credit, he had very little to do with. It was his predecessor selling weapons to Saudi Arabia so that they could oppress their people, and in turn Saudi Arabia used the OPEC veto power to get the U.S. the cheapest oil anywhere on the planet. And this is why all but one of the 9/11 hijackers were from Saudi Arabia. It's a subtle hint that they're pissed at us. And so at least the people are. So I don't buy that, well, gee, we're not going to work with Iran because of how they're treating their people. I think that makes good press. I think you say that, but that certainly hasn't been the history of how the U.S. makes deals. And if it's about stopping a nuclear weapon from falling into their hands, I think in part it was what Claire said earlier, and I think it applies here too, which is I think it's basically negotiation tactics. I think that when they're negotiating strongest is when they're actually, and the article all but said that, is when they start talking about, well, we could always work with Russia, and it's sort of like, so I think that's the first thing is most of this is negotiation. The second thing is Trump did incalculable damage by nixing that deal.
He did.
And so it's now nobody, and they said, look, you have to promise us that future administrations won't do that. Well, in the past, we haven't operated that way in the U.S. We haven't done it. But you can't make that promise because the Constitution allows the president to nix the deal at any time. So it's like, now that's on the table,
And they don't even want to look at the past, Nick. Let's be honest. In politics, it's short-term memory all the time.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah. Everybody knows it's the two presidents before that make the economy that you're dealing with as the president. But no, you take credit for it. It's everything you did the minute you walked into office. It's nothing to do with the 8 years before.
You breathed.
But anyone with half a business brain, or actually is in the economy, or looks at this, with any real depth, knows that this is not the case. But short-term memory at least. But there's things to be worried about. This next article, Dick, from the Express, Jacob Paul from the UK is writing an article. Should all be worried? Alarm raised over terrifying Russia, Iran, and China alliance. Russia and Iran appear to be cozying up amid the Ukraine war, while China is also working with Tehran as the trio positions itself against the West. Okay. A security expert has said the terrifying prospect of China, Iran, and Russia forming an axis of evil should be a huge concern for the West as the nations strike warmer relationships, which has already seen the transfer of weapons to Russian troops amid the Ukraine war. Israel's former acting national security advisor, Jacob Nagel, told Express UK in an exclusive interview that we should all be worried about Russia and Iran cozying up. It comes after Iranian-made suicide drones were reportedly used in a recent spate of brutal strikes, which had taken out up to 40% of critical infrastructure across 16 regions of Ukraine. But there are also concerns that Iran will become a nuclear power, which is why the 2015 nuclear deal was struck, formerly known as the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the JCPOA, in which it was agreed that Western sanctions on Iran would be lifted in return for significant restrictions being imposed on its nuclear program. However, former U.S. President Donald Trump tore up the deal in 2018, arguing that the United States no longer makes empty threats. Now, world leaders are scrambling to revive a deal to limit the prospect of Iran developing a nuclear weapon. But according to U.S. intelligence officials, Iran is scrambling for Russia assistance in a bid to bolster its nuclear weapons program in the event that a new deal fails to materialize. Mr. Nagel told the Express, Russia owes Iran because Iran is sending them suicide drones and maybe in the future ballistic missiles and other weapons. I don't think Russia would send Iran nuclear technology or systems, but all the weapons, I don't see why they would not send them. They would not do it today because they, Russia, currently do not have enough weapons to send. At this moment, it is Iran that is sending Russia weapons. But after the war is over, this is one of the biggest problems. The tightening of the relations between Russia and Iran is worrying. We have to be worried. Everyone should be worried. Israel, the US, Europe, everyone should be worried. And he warned that a return to the old nuclear deal may not be the safest option. China and Russia were both signees of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, given that they were part of the UN Security Council, which signed the deal. Mr. Nagel said Russia and Iran are working together. China is doing business with Iran. Both of them are adversaries of the US. Iran wants to go back to the JPCOA, and they will agree to this horrible proposal that they have on the table.
Russia doesn't need to send nuclear weapons to Iran for Iran to have nuclear weapons. If that makes any sense. All they need to do is give them both the know-how and the technology to develop their own.
Exactly.
They have the infrastructure potentially, and the as it stands at the moment, enough probably economy to actually support it, to actually develop their own nuclear weapons. They don't need to do that. They don't need to send the weapons.
It's just making the minerals to do it.
Yeah, exactly. That's part of the problem. But that can be overcome. Like I said, it's just a case of just being able to find the resources and the know-how and the technology to do it, and also to make the ICBMs in order to miniaturize the warheads in order to make ICBMs out of them. Yeah, that's
Iran doesn't need ICBMs.
No, it's true.
Just want to murder they want to kill all of the I think it's Sunnis and Israel. That's
but even having the know-how to develop ICBMs, or even just having ICBMs, is enough for
clearly they want to have a voice, and nuclear protection. They want to have a loud voice at the table, and those that have nuclear weapon technology at their fingertips, so to speak, have the loudest voices in these disagreements and in these organizations. So they want to be a player. And they're pretty volatile right now in their opinions of other countries. So it is concerning. It's very concerning for those of us that they hate, especially. Europe, like they said, Europe should worry. Israel absolutely should worry, and so should the U.S. They're definitely targets. I don't know if their targets would be internal at all. They seem to handle that in a very aggressive way on their own without nuclear weapons.
And they would probably wage war against the rest of the Muslim world too, because everyone over there is on each other's hate slate.
Yeah. But even sending the technology or the components would be a violation as far as everyone looking at Russia. If they did that with Iran, it's going to, not that Russia is bound to any of us under a nuclear treaty that they're holed up to anyway. But it would be just like as if they gave them a complete weapon. All you have to do is give them the technology. I agree. Shall I go on? There's only a little left.
Yes, please.
There would be an agreement within 5 minutes, no matter what the Russians and the Iranians are doing in Ukraine. This is hypocrisy with our friends in the US and in Europe. The U.S. should understand that there is no agreement anymore. That's it. Russia and China are not partners with the UN Security Council anymore. They gave Iran whatever they want, and they are not part of the P5+1, the members of the UN Security Council, which originally signed the deal. Mr. Nagel also warned that Iran is helping Russia swerve the impacts of harsh Western sanctions slapped down on Moscow for invading Ukraine. He said, Iran is providing information. Experts are going from Russia to Iran and Iran to Russia. They have warm relations and they are working together. This all comes after Tehran signed a memorandum of obligations that will grant it full membership in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the SCO, an alliance that includes China and Russia, 15 years after it first applied to join the Asian body. The Iranian president, Ebrahimi Raisi, said in September that expanding the organization would help to push back against Washington, decrying the draconian sanctions, which he said required new solutions. Trita Parsi, vice president of the Quincy Institute, told CNN, Iran has managed to begin to break out of its isolation. He added that in the short term, Raisi will get another smile from Vladimir Putin and some handshakes, but stressed that it would not do much for Iran economically.
How could it? I mean, come on. Seriously. That's two kids that have rocks in their pockets trying to figure out how to buy a hot dog.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Wow. You know, buddy, looks like they're in it already, right, Aimee? I mean, it looks like
they are. It looks like they've got their trifecta there, their alliance that they're going for against the West, the evil West, so it's interesting to see that. It's also not good. It strengthens the three of them against the sanctions that the West has placed against them.
Mm-hmm.
That's rather frustrating as well. Yeah,
that is definitely one of the countermeasures of sanctions. When you're doing sanctions like that, you're definitely building terse relationships with the people that you're putting them on. And those three countries have severe sanctions from us greatly, because that's how we express our disdain for things that they're doing. By saying that we don't want to deal with you this way or that way. But it is, I have to agree with them when they call out the hypocrisy of it, because we still do make other deals, it's kind of like catch and catch can. It can be perceived as empty threats. And so it is hard to get other countries to back you up when you're doing it, because you don't really stand on it very firmly. But I also know that it's part of the game, right, Nick? It's just part of how it gets done right now. Hard to go against.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I do think it's concerning. My hope is that it's not going to last very long. The deal with China's already, they were, 6 months ago, they're like, hey, we're best buddies. And now they're barely on speaking terms, and China's kind of undermining Russia a little bit, but they're certainly not pleased with them. So it's, my hope is that the whole thing collapses. But yeah, I think it's something that people should be concerned about and keep an eye on.
Yeah, China does seem to be a bit of an unwilling partnership at the moment, doesn't it? It's kind of, shaky grounds.
Yeah, because they even came out and said, nuclear anything is completely unacceptable in the whole situation of the invasion of Ukraine. Like, there are definitely signs that it's not 100% all, buddy. But one thing I would point out is, aside from, any military and economic benefit they can do for each other, there's also things that could rub off about, how we regard our citizens and so on. And there's some real ugly that could come out of that side of it as well.
Yeah.
So I hope that isn't the case. But looking at the clock, Aimee, I wonder if you shouldn't lead us through.
Absolutely, that's what I'm thinking. Just take us right through a very quick roundtable thing. So let's get started right on that. First off, I'm going to pick on you, DKG Custom. I'm so sorry. But what are your thoughts on this evening?
Why me? Why me? I was just sitting back, letting the grown-ups talk. I mean, don't bring me into this. I mean, it's quite interesting what Dick just said. It's like the interaction between Russia and Iran. You know, there might actually be some good come out of it, where Russia turns to Iran and say, you know what, you should stop shooting your people. You know, there might actually be diplomatic stuff that goes on behind the scenes where Russia actually does some good. Might happen. Might happen. No, look, come on, Matt. You know, there is potential there where they could teach Iran a lesson in not completely screwing up your people. But you know, I know they're not doing a great job themselves. But come on, be grown-ups about it. But anyway, yeah, that's it. So we'll see how it goes. I'll just shut up and go back to my little corner.
Okay. That sounds good. Thank you so much, DKG. And next up, we have M2M Matt. Matt, what are your thoughts on this evening?
Yeah, it's been good. I've been getting some kind of a bit of a lesson of what's going on in Iran at the moment. I've kind of turned a blind eye to that recently. That's one of the reasons why I joined you tonight. So, yeah, it's been a good sort of lesson as well. So I appreciate it. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Matt. I appreciate it. And next up, we have Nicholas Soutter. Nick, what are your thoughts on this evening?
I don't know. I think it was summed up pretty nicely. I think Iran contributing in any way whatsoever is a cause for concern. The friendship is a cause for concern. But unless I'm missing something, and that's entirely possible, I don't see a long-term strategy for either of them. It's only really it's only for the duration of the war that I can tell. It helps Putin win his war. It's just enough to maybe help with that. At least I think that's what he's hoping, and it helps Iran at the negotiating table. That's all I see. Things have started out smaller and simpler than that, and blossomed into a loving relationship. So we'll see what happens. But I think I'm cautiously optimistic that it's a tempest in a teapot, and nobody needs to be too concerned. But it's concerning. You got to watch it. So that's my thought.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Nick. I appreciate that. And yeah, Nick always has great insights. He's awesome to have on the show. Thank you.
Oh, thank you guys so much.
You're very welcome. And next up, we have Commander 401. Commander, what are your thoughts on this evening?
This evening was very informative, and what we learned is Iran the whatever fuckface can go to hell, and so can Putin.
Absolutely. Seems to be.
It's pronounced Ayatollah lick my assahola.
Oh, Jesus.
Oh, I knew I pronounced that wrong.
That's even better. I like that one. That's good.
Exactly. Well, thank you very much. And next up, we have Claire S. Bear. Claire, what are your thoughts on this evening?
Again, quite an informative and good conversation. It's great to be able to talk about these stuff with people with different opinions and look at everything that's going on. I have to agree with Nick. I am concerned as an American about this alliance, but I also remember that all three of those countries are in it for themselves, and there really has to be something that the other has to offer them to do anything, because they don't look at countries as friends. They have no alliances, really. They're all islands as far as I've seen them in politics. So hopefully, based on the war, based on the protests, and based on China's own troubles that we've seen recently, none of them are in a place to really offer anybody anything besides fixing their own stuff internally. So hopefully it's not too much of a thing to worry about, but it'll pass. It might all just be PR, political PR, as we see it, to make deals that actually will help their countries with other people.
Exactly.
But thank you again. Great conversation. I hope to have many more.
Thank you so much. Me too. And thank you so much. It's been great having you on here too with me. Next up, we have Dick Dawson. Dick, what are your thoughts on this evening?
I really, really hope that the people of Iran totally get together and pull this off and take power away from Jerk Me Off From Behind or whatever his fucking name is. You know, we're all rooting for you. You know, take the power back, as it's said, and all those other, you know, sayings I could use. But just grab that guy and give him a fist right from behind. There you go, bitch. What do you think, Aimee?
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, I just very hard to follow up.
How could you top that?
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I was just trying to say. Is, you know, how do I follow up from that? Yeah, I do have concerns. I obviously do. You know, with this alliance, and yeah, that more than likely they are in it for themselves only, and that just seems to be how these countries have operated in the past. It's just. But it is a concern because these alliances do make them stronger, and I do have concerns about where if Iran did get a nuclear weapon, where they would use it if they did. There are concerns there too, and yeah, the protests and everything too. They've been sustained for quite a while this time, so it's looking like they're not going to stop anytime soon, and it looks like they're not going to stop hurting their, having the people get, having those violent crackdowns and everything. So hopefully something will give for these poor protesters too. So, but I do want to thank everyone in the panel for coming. Thank you so much. We always have a great time with this. We try to keep everybody informed. And I do want to thank everyone in the chat for coming as well. Thank you for all of your support and the interaction in the chat and everything. So thank you for that. And I hope everyone has a great evening. Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Have a good one, all.
Mm-hmm.
See you in World War III.
God, I hope not.
Dear
I
Lord.
know.
It's over. Go home.